Good morning and good afternoon. We're just going to wait a few more minutes for the participants to join. We've already got quite a large number and we have over 700 registrations for the webinar. So if you'll just be patient for a few more minutes, we'll give people a few more minutes to join. Thank you. Okay, well, let's get going. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Naray. I'm the VP of IoT and ICS Cybersecurity at CyberX. And today we're joined by experts from Microsoft, Fortinet and Optiv to talk about securing IoT or OT with fewer personnel, which is about the benefits of automation and integration in identifying and remediating threats faster. I want to start by introducing today's presenters. We have Jonathan Mechik from Microsoft, Michelle Balderson from Fortinet, Sean Tufts from Optiv, and again, my name is Phil Naray. I'll be the moderator and I'll start with a short introductory presentation. So we're talking about IoT devices. There are many definitions of what an IoT device is. We're talking about enterprise IoT, not the types of devices you would have in your home. But there's a variety of different types, from IoT sensors in plants to smart devices in conference rooms to building management systems. And whether or not the number is 25 billion or less or more, we know that more and more of these devices are being deployed. And because they support digital business innovation, some people call it Industry 4.0, some people call it digitalization, but it's about using more connected and smart devices to improve the efficiency and productivity of our organizations. But as a result, what that means is that the average organization will soon have more than 3 times the number of endpoints that they previously had. So that increases the attack surface and that increases the risk. And it turns out that these devices are soft targets for adversaries. They're typically unseen and unmanaged by the IT department. They've traditionally not had agents on them. They weren't designed to support agents. They're typically designed with goals of low cost rather than security in mind. They often have weak or default credentials, incorporate open source components that are vulnerable, typically very often connected to the internet. And as a result, that increases your attack surface. And you'll see on the right, the various types of devices I'm talking about can be many different kinds, from, as I said, building management systems at the top left. On the right, you see automated robots in a warehouse, security cameras, building access control systems, sensors in plants. It's a wide variety of devices, but they all share these common characteristics. I'm going to give you 4 examples of threats and attacks that have been launched. I'm going to start with ransomware. Of course, we're familiar with ransomware shutting down corporate networks, but they've also shut down factories, as in the Norsk Hydro example. Earlier this year, the Department of Homeland Security in the United States announced that a major container port had its security cameras and access control systems compromised with ransomware. And we know that the big risk of these types of attacks is downtime and financial losses. Second example is the Triton attack, which was an attack launched on a petrochemical facility. It was ICS-aware malware, in other words, malware that had been specifically written to compromise, in this case, safety controllers in the plant. So we see now that there's a risk to safety and the environment in these types of attacks. The adversary was very sophisticated. They actually built a backdoor that was deployed to the safety controller and resided in the firmware memory region of the controller. And they modified the native protocol of that device so they could communicate with their backdoor. Next example is the VPN filter campaign. It was a nation state campaign that compromised over 500,000 routers, exploiting vulnerabilities in those routers, installing malware into them so they could perform man-in-the-middle attacks, packet sniffing attacks, and potentially compromise endpoint devices as well. And of course, you can see why a router would be an ideal target for an adversary. It's connected to the internet on one side and connected to your corporate network on the other side. It's unmanaged, typically unpatched, and often misconfigured. The last example is an attack that Microsoft's research team discovered or announced in August of 2019. It was a voice over IP phone that had default credentials. In that same blog post, Microsoft talked about a printer also being compromised and a video compression device being compromised. And they leveraged the vulnerabilities in those devices to deploy malware from which they launched attacks into the network looking for sensitive intellectual property. So again, a perfect example of a IoT device that's unmanaged, that's vulnerable, that's exposed to the internet, and gives the adversary a gateway to pivot into your corporate network and move laterally within it. So Gartner has written extensively about this. They call the category cyber physical systems. It's any device or system that interacts with the physical world. You can get the full report from our website. One of their comments is that most CIOs and CISOs aren't even aware of all the cyber physical systems deployed in their organizations, primarily because traditionally the CISO's organization wasn't responsible for these types of devices like building management systems or smart TVs or OT devices in plants. Gartner sees that increasingly governments will pass laws holding executives personally liable if they don't create safety and security first enterprise. In other words, similar to a Sarbanes-Oxley a few years ago, well, about 10 years ago, was used to get management teams to pay attention to weaknesses in their financial reporting. In this case, if you're not putting in place the proper controls to monitor and patch your cyber physical systems, they see the same thing happening there. And then finally, that these various domains really make sense as part of a single centrally controlled security organization. It doesn't make sense to have different groups responsible for security across different devices, because as we've said, often adversaries move from one domain to the other. And the teams that you've already trained in your organization to deal with breaches need to be able to deal with all types of breaches as they cross these various domains. So quick word about what we've done to help address this problem. Number one, we've built an architecture that is very easy to deploy because it's agentless, does not require deployment of agents, and it's passive, which means it's non-invasive, has zero impact on the network or the devices. Certainly in factory environments where we're dealing with millisecond response times, you can't use active or scanning type devices to control them. It doesn't require rules or signatures. It relies on behavioral analytics to identify attacks and anomalies. And it's available both as an on-premises solution or a cloud-based solution or a hybrid of the two. It uses multiple forms of threat protection because just using one isn't sufficient. It uses comparison to a device profile database, which tracks devices and how they use certain ports or DNS addresses and then looks for deviations from that behavior. But it also uses a patented behavioral analytics engine that we've developed, that's specifically developed for tracking machine-to-machine behavior, and looks for anomalies, in this case, over time, as opposed to compared to a standard profile. And then the third aspect is that we have an in-house threat intelligence team formed by former nation-state defenders called Section 52. And they've developed a series of automated threat extraction tools and also some human analysis to continuously feed our system with the latest threat intelligence about campaigns, threats, malware, targeting IoT and OT environments. And then finally, because you've already invested in a number of tools in your IT security stack, such as SIEMs, like Microsoft Sentinel, such as SOAR and ticketing systems, configuration management databases, firewalls, and NACs. From early point, we've put a big emphasis on integrating natively with these various solutions, because again, it's about automation and integration to speed the time to identify and mitigate these types of threats. Types of challenges we address, telling you what devices you have, how they're communicating, primarily used so you can implement better segmentation and zero trust policies. If you don't know what you have, if you don't know how they're communicating, you're going to be in the dark when it comes to establishing better segmentation. Secondly, all these devices have vulnerabilities. But the question is, how do you prioritize patching those vulnerabilities or mitigating them so that you're protecting your most important assets, your crown jewel assets? Thirdly, how do you know if you have any threats in your environment right now? If you're not continuously monitoring the environment, you're not going to know and you're not going to be able to respond to them. A side benefit of the cyber monitoring is identifying misconfigured or malfunctioning equipment, which can reduce the efficiency in your network. An example would be a misconfigured router, a misconfigured HMI that's spewing traffic across the network. And by continuously monitoring that traffic, we can help your OT teams quickly identify the source of those inefficiencies and address them. And then finally, as I talked about before, integrating with your stack enables you to leverage your existing people, processes, tools, so you can centralize IT security in your SOCs, as Gartner has recommended, and demonstrate to auditors that you have put the right focus on building a safety and security first environment. So automation integration, as we've said, important now more than ever. If you have fewer personnel available, fewer personnel in a single place, you're going to need automation and integration, not only to reduce the time to identify and remediate threats. We've also heard from our clients that they are now looking to deploy security into additional facilities and plants because they're concerned about the increase in remote access to those networks, both by their own employees and by third-party contractors. And they want to make sure that they can quickly spot any unusual or unauthorized activity in the traffic to those sites. Example of a screen from our IoT security platform showing built-in integrations, again, available out of the box from our system so that you can quickly share information across different systems. We recently announced a partnership with Microsoft Azure IoT to add our anomaly detection capabilities to Microsoft Azure Security Center for IoT. And in the next presentation, you'll see in some ways in how this could be used. Some examples of our integration with Fortinet, which is a firewall system where you would use our information, for example, to alert on any scanning malware during the early stage of the kill chain when the adversary is in your network looking for vulnerable systems to pivot to. If we find that type of activity, we can communicate it with the firewall and immediately block the source of that malicious traffic. Some other examples here. If we identify ransomware in the environment, changes to the devices. So if you remember in the Triton example, the adversary installed backdoors into the controller, that would immediately be detected. New devices connected to the network, you may have a policy in place that says no one's allowed to connect their laptops to the network, but if you don't have a way of monitoring for that type of activity, you can't enforce the policy. Alerting on dangerous commands. If you're running a high-rise building and in the middle of summer someone sends a stop command to the elevators, that could be a serious safety issue. So alerting on those types of commands. And then, as we talked about before, identifying misconfigured devices. And now I'd like to hand it to Jonathan, who's going to talk about Microsoft Azure Security Center for IoT. Jonathan, it's yours.
Thank you, Phil. Just 1 second, I will set up. So my name is Jonathan Megzik, or Jonathan in Hebrew. First of all, thank you, Phil, and thank you, CyberX, for hosting this webinar. So I'm a product manager at Azure Security Center for IoT, and I will be discussing today about end-to-end security, and I will be showing our security product that we developed in our group, and afterwards I will show you a demo that we did on RSA conference. So Phil talked about it already, and we are seeing that IoT is fueling the industry. I can say that in Microsoft, the IoT hub adoption is going up really fast, and we have already more than 10 of thousands of new customers. Also, as Phil mentioned, there are two things that we see that with the opportunities that IoT brings us, they bring also a lot of risk. And not only that it's a risk of cyber attacks, there's now being a question about governments deciding and putting regulation over IoT security, and starting to obligate manufacturers to take accountability on the security of those devices, and may have asked them to recall. So it's not a matter of question anymore if you want to implement security on your devices. So Phil already mentioned four attacks that happened. One of them is Microsoft research group, and we at Azure Security Center for IoT, where we identified that there are a lot of different things you can do to compromise the device. You can steal data from it, you can pollute it, compromise it, ransomware it. And I think that the most interesting thing is that the IoT device is becoming the weakest point in the link in the organizational network, which means that it doesn't only risk itself, it is a risk for the entire organizational network. And now I'll be talking about a little bit about Microsoft and what Microsoft is doing in the IoT security field. So Microsoft is spending over $1 billion in cybersecurity, $5 billion investment for 5 years in IoT. And we at Azure Security Center for IoT are utilizing all this investment operation-wise and technology-wise. We are leveraging cooperation with inside group. For example, we are working with Microsoft Threat Intelligence. Just an example, Microsoft Threat Intelligence is processing 6 trillion security signals per day. And we are leveraging all of that in our product, as well as cooperating with inside groups in Microsoft. We're of course cooperating with other companies and our partner program that Phil mentioned earlier. And of course, CyberX is one of those companies. And CyberX is actually an official Microsoft Intelligence security association partner, and we are now working on integrating CyberX Insight in our systems. So Azure Security Center, as Azure Security Center, we are integrated in 3 different user interfaces, and our vision is to be flexible as we can. So we are integrated in Azure Security Center, of course, in the Azure IoT Hub itself, and now in Azure Sentinel. So how is our mechanism working? So we have our detection engines that are agent-based. We are supporting all kinds of platforms. We are supporting Windows, we're supporting Linux, and we're supporting Autos. So we're supporting, I think, almost every device, or a significant amount of a variety of devices. But besides that, we're working now on agentless capabilities. We have some agentless capabilities, and we're working on creating much more capabilities. Some of them, of course, will become available when we are integrated with CyberX. And we are supporting edge security model. And the last thing is, what is the security value that we are bringing? So the security value that we are bringing on top of those detection engines are the recommendations that will give you as a customer the ability to understand your security posture in the IoT solution end-to-end, meaning you can see the entire overview from device to your cloud resources, including the IoT Edge, the IoT Hub. So you can see the entire your entire IoT solution. We're leveraging Microsoft Threat Intelligence to give you live alerts on that is getting feed on live threats around the world. And we give the option to create your own custom alerts that utilizes your knowledge on the devices. So with that being said, I would want to show you just a few screens. So this is our overview screen. As you can see, we have on the...
Jonathan, you have to share a different window. So
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, as you can see, this is our overview page. And you can see here at the upper part, this is the threat prevention. This is all our security. This is actually the security posture of the solution. You can understand from that all the devices and resources in your solution, what are the risks that there is in the solution. And beneath it, there are the detections that we're doing live. This is another good screen that you can view the recommendations, and that the fact that we are doing an end-to-end visibility. You see virtual machines, devices, the IoT Hub. There can be storage, SQL, any security resource, cloud resource that there is. So now I'm going to move to our demo. So in our demo that we did in RSA conference this year, we created an attack that the attacker is using Mirai botnet techniques in order to compromise IoT device. And from the IoT device, it started to create lateral movement inside the network and compromised a file share, which is a Windows server in this case. And with that, then we want to show, those are things that Paul already talked about, and I already talked as well, that there's a major security risk with the IoT device, which can lead to this kind of attacks. So in this view, you can see this is an Azure Sentinel view, which is an investigation that we do after the attacker, and after we see an attack is ongoing. So this alert is talking about suspicious process executed. And as you can see, we can see that here, this is the machine that the process was ran on. And we can see that Mimikatz was ran. So Mimikatz is a very suspicious process. It's stealing credentials from Windows machines. And if I want to drill down to understand what is happening here, I will want to watch with who the file share is talking with. So I can see here, this is the IP that the file share is using. And when I do related alerts, I can see this alert. It's called outgoing SMB connection. So how is this related? I will see what is the related entities. And I know that outgoing SMB connection is an alert that is triggered by Azure Security Center for IoT. So we can see here, there's a webcam device that triggered this alert. So actually what happened, if I will move it here. So if I want to drill down on what happened, this IoT device has access through SMB to this file share. So because I know this network, I can see something is this thing is very, very suspicious. And SMB is very interesting both for both reasons. One is that SMB is a file sharing protocol. And the second one is very famous port that was used by WannaCry and Eternal Blue exploits. So I can understand that this IoT device something is wrong with it. And if I want to drill down a little bit more and look at the alerts, I can definitely see that this device has been compromised. And if I want to see, we can find a brute force attempt that is very, it's a technique that Mirai botnet is using. And with very fast investigation, you can find the IoT device, how the attacker created lateral movement and access with port 445 and compromised the file share. And from that, he stole credentials from the file share. And I think you can understand that from that point on, he can do whatever he wants inside the organizational network. So this example is utilizing our agent and our Linux agent, and this is doing with collaboration with, of course, ASC, Azure Security Center, that are on the cloud. And you can see how the end-to-end security is a very important thing in our world today. And with that, we can also integrate CyberX insights, for example, on the agentless worlds to create the same detections. So I would like to thank you all, and I let Michelle continue.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll just set up here. Give me one moment here. So as everybody has said this morning, the number of devices are dramatically increasing that we're deploying onto our networks. We're really enabling our business by having sensorization. And really what that's causing is the digital attack surface increasing dramatically. There's a couple of questions relative to the network and different networking as well, which is as the devices are changing, we're also adopting new technologies. There's a question about LoRaWAN and Zigbee and LTE-M. So as we see changes to number of devices that are coming onto the network, we're also looking at how the transport is changing and also the compute. And so really what this all means is that we're interconnecting systems that have never been interconnected before, that were never really truly intended to be interconnected, or we're enabling new modern applications that are intended to be interconnected, but putting them right beside applications that are legacy. That just simply expands the digital attack surface, and that we have to address that as we're working through the digitization of our environments. So the OT cybersecurity challenges that we see is within all industries is that there's a digital transformation of OT services that with that digital transformation, we have to continue to take in consideration the physical safety concerns, right? Because from an IT perspective, we're really focused towards data, but from an OT perspective, we need to be able to protect all the way down to level 0. As I go through a Purdue modeling example, I'll talk about the race to level 0, which is the attackers are really trying to get at that physical equipment. We're working to ensure productivity and uptime, but as we add in more devices, we can then see distributed denial of service attacks that could impact our entire operations. We need to be able to make sure that we're applying security measures that ensure productivity and uptime. We're investing because of the need to be able to become more operationally efficient and focused towards the customer need and being able to change that customer experience of being able to drive from the moment the customer is interested in a product or a solution or even energy to their home. We need to be able to have a quick response to the customer to be able to get that product to them. We need to be able to ensure product integrity, which is if our environments are breached, the integrity of the product can come into question, and then at that point there could be considerable loss in cost of throwing out that product to be able to then rebuild it because of that. And then we talked about regulatory compliance, which is globally, we're seeing more and more regulation, and we need to be able to make sure that from the moment that we build a policy, that we're able to deal with the compliance and the audit capabilities of it. My presentation is really to discuss what's the value of zero trust network access and microsegmentation. And so from a zero trust and a microsegmentation perspective, I suggest that we use both of them in combination. What happens in many environments is that we make a decision to put firewalling, but we don't necessarily segment the network to be able to really get to controls. And so what zero trust network access and microsegmentation allow us to do is to be able to onboard the device, authenticate the user and understand more about the user and the device, bring that user into a default VLAN, and then make a decision of, do I want to be able to put them into community VLAN, or do I want to be able to put them into an isolated VLAN? Once I have that, then at that point, I can then apply policy and access and privileged based on who and what they are. So you'll see from the authenticate user perspective, it's a little, I'm not sure exactly who that is or what that device is, but by the time that I've done the process, I know exactly what type of device that they're using, who that person is, what their privilege access should be, and then I can put them into a least privilege group based off of what their access should be. So why is it important? It's important because when we do a physical segmentation, really what we're doing is we're segmenting based on assumed trust. From an assumed trust perspective is it allows me to be a part of a VLAN, and it allows me to talk individually amongst everybody, and that I don't necessarily have a great understanding of what's in the environment. And then at that point, I have free communication between all the different assets and all the different people within that assumed trust, or being one of the community. In other words, being a part of a community VLAN. Whereas if we start to do microsegmentation and zero trust, you'll see on the right-hand side, I actually understand the individuals, what their roles are, what devices that they're using, and then I'm also isolating them, which is they have to be able to communicate amongst each other, they have to go through a gateway. And in that gateway, then we can apply security policies and we can communicate and secure that environment from the perspective of segmenting and being able to do a least privilege access or zero trust access to it. Now, I talked about Purdue modeling, and Fortinet, as a part of our OT team, we look at all of the different frameworks that would necessarily apply to OT and IT, and that we really truly believe in the digital transformation, or what Gartner is saying from the perspective of IT, OT, IoT, really coming together in a digital services world. So when we build up a solution, what we look at is we go from the lowest level, which is, as an attacker, I'm really trying to go and attack the physical layer. Most of the security solutions today will really protect down to level 2 of the Purdue model. What we believe is that we really have to get to physical protection and protect down to level 0. There was a question earlier about where and how far down can you go in the Purdue model. And today, from the perspective of the 3 vendors that are involved here, we can really take ourselves down to that process control level, and that we can apply security controls onto the controllers and into the network. And so what we're attempting, or what we're doing there from the perspective of securing, is doing a segmentation model, a microsegmentation model, authentication model, and the ability of being able to see all of the different devices and pass telemetry. So being able to get telemetry information from all of the different aspects of the environment up into the SIM. So from the perspective of Microsoft Sentinel, we can pass all this that information up, and then at that point they can have even more detailed information from the perspective of the graphics that Jonathan was showing to us. Then what we need to be able to do is look at the operation and control zone. So depending upon the industry that you're in, this is either on-site or this is a data center. So as an example, in electrical, it would be an EMS data center. In a manufacturing, this would be on-site. Typically, what we would see in these types of data centers is a need for segmentation, authentication controls, and being able to tie into Active Directory. Again, we want to be able to have the ability of being able to see all of these different devices and users, and of being able to apply controls. Then we move into the typical enterprise zone, and between level 3.5 and level 4 and level 5, really what you're seeing is management, advanced threats, authentication pieces. Level 3.5 in the modern environment really starts to become where we'd see the shared services and shared data modeling between IT and OT, but you'll also have then cloud-based access pieces. So we have to take in consideration with the Purdue model, it really traditionally goes up to level 4. With an enhanced Purdue model that I'm showing here, really what we're showing is taking in consideration all of the modern applications. So we have to take in consideration remote access, third-party vendor access, that then transports across the enterprise zone to be able to bring controls into operations or in the control area zones. We have to be able to do that with strong authentication and 2-factor authentication. And yet we also have to take in consideration the modern applications we're talking about with IoT and cloud-based services. And so when we take a look at this, is that really IoT is a vertical versus a horizontal way that Purdue has been looking at it. And in that is that it breaks the modeling of the Purdue modeling, but really it's just simply another segment that we need to be able to put into the environment and segment the physical layer and the control area zone away from all of the industrial IoT-based applications. So those automated guided vehicles, the access control systems, the physical security systems, anything that is really a data application is either going up into level 3.5 and sharing its data, or it's going up into cloud-based services. And we need to be able to put security controls in place on that cloud-based service. So to be able to establish the framework, what we really look at is IEC 62443, which is what I really truly just went through. the NIST framework, which is incorporated really truly within what I'm talking about here, which is we need to be able to identify the attack surface. We need to be able to protect. We need to be able to detect the anomalies in the security instances, and then we need to be able to have appropriate response. And from that response, we need to be able to make sure that we recover. So of the combination of the vendors here, we really help you identify all of those assets, protect those assets, be able to detect the anomalies against them, and then respond to be able to have that appropriate response with what we're talking about with Microsoft and the SIM and SOAR-based technologies. That really brings together the ability to be able to have a broad, integrated, and automated framework against security, and this framework of being able to make sure that you're securing your environment. And I'll pass this over to Optiv. And the key thing here is that you can consume these in multiple different models. And one of the models would be being able to consume security from the perspective of managed services. But I think the key thing here is being able to make sure that you can work with consultative services to be able to understand how to get to a maturity and a security maturity model. So thank you very much, Sean. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. I like your enhanced Purdue model too. That was pretty cool.
Thank you.
Sean, you might still be on mute, and also go into slideshow mode, please.
I'm still on mute. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so Sean Tufts, Practice Director for Optiv. I handle all things industrial control and Internet of Things. Let's see here. There we go. I love that Michelle ended on this NIST cybersecurity framework, right? This is exactly the point. And it's developing these ecosystems where we can put in all phases of that NIST framework to identify, protect, detect, respond pieces, and build a program that grows and flexes with the company. I think all too often we think of these IT security, it's taken a long time to get to a maturity model, and some would say we're still not even close, but we're blending these solutions together. We're getting cohesive teams together. And when I look at this from my seat, I see this as a plan, build, run conversation, right? Optiv as a corporation is an SI, right? And we call ourselves a security SI, where we're focused myopically on cybersecurity from the IT and OT lens. And when we build these programs out, it's important to think of them as living, breathing ideas and systems that we're working with in that people, process, and technology place. As we build this out, and this is a quick image on our cybersecurity professional services line card for all things industrial control, having that plan, that business integration, working through technical integrations from a product perspective, and then coming out with operational execution is a really hard challenge, right? All too often in my seat, we see customers and clients doing great in 1 to 2 of these areas, but really letting other pieces fall. I think that's especially important in the OT world because we're just now getting our arms around what security means in OT and how can we make this really operate. The piece here that's missing in that plan, build, run strategy is the 2 tails of that chart. The business challenges and marrying that with the end resilience. If anyone's done any elaborate assessments or architecture diagrams or gap assessments, we've all been kind of burdened to death with this risk chart, right? Impact times likelihood. I myself in my career, shortly after the Deepwater Horizon incident, we went to an offshore drilling company, not the same one that was involved in that. And they ultimately laughed us out of the room because they said these risk populations and these numbers you're giving us are astronomical. It's just a joke that comparing risk and thinking you're going to move the needle by showing us $1 billion risk figure. And we agreed, right? I think that transitions nicely into the business resilience component, right? how do you turn that risk into something that you can operationalize, something you can tactically take on and programmatically break down the pieces of those components to offer business value, right? In our firm, we talk a lot about mixing complexity, cost, and effectiveness to truly show what the value to the firm is. Now, in cybersecurity, there's not a direct ROI behind a lot of this, but finding ways we can communicate back to the corporations, especially in OT, where we're talking about business resilience, uptime, network resilience, safety, environmental concerns, and how are we taking those risks and bubbling them into a place where the business can act on it. This is my childhood hero, Kelvin. I'll let you guys read the quote, but I think we've all been given a list from a consultant or a professional service org, an Excel sheet of 600 things to fix. And I think that's a real miss. Building through an ethos to that and a chain of projects you can take on that actually have business value is the key part there, right? No one's going to take on a list that's 300 lines long, but breaking things apart into programs really helps justify the spend, the project, the duration, the tooling costs, right? Another piece of that is when we build those programmatic stories and all those risk combining value into our roadmap, when we break it apart, that also gives you a defendable position when, you know, someone from the C-suite comes down and says, hey, why aren't you doing this? You know, where's your focus here? Not there. You can go back to them and say, hey, look, this is where we slotted these things. This is why we're tackling this project. This is why we're not tackling this project. I think that gives our security practitioners, whether in OT or IT, a really strong standpoint to show priority and why you're moving the needle in one direction or another. And I want to focus on that tail at the end of this, on the far right of that chart, that operational component, right? Where you start putting these ideas and these thoughts into operational rigor. Everyone right now is facing this balancing act of analog tools getting plugged into digital capabilities, right? And trying to match that. Are we an air gap network? Are we truly leveraging the Azures of the world to get more digital tools out of this? That's a really fine line to walk. I empathize with customers who are trying to marry those two worlds. The thing from a security practitioner standpoint, especially one having a managed service that we support, is when we find these burgeoning new economies and tool sets and capabilities, but we're marrying those two worlds, we want to put a warm blanket of security around it. And really having managed detection and response capabilities that look at, you know, we call these the three kings, but endpoint, network, and SIM, right? And when we see new technologies come to bear, we want to put those tools around it. That also leads into the security journey we started with CyberX about 2 years ago, where we looked at IT security data and what those IT teams are doing from our managed service point of view. What were they concerned with? What were they spending their time on? How could we help? How could we alleviate some of that stress? At the same time, looking at our OT clients and figuring out how are they managing this, right? And obviously the solution 3-4 years ago was put it to the plant manager, give them responsibility for it. And that really didn't work. It didn't scale. We also have an interesting question where, you know, tools like Fortinet or CyberX, how do we make sure that we're connecting those two worlds, right? In a lot of cases, not a lot of people are, you know, logging into every single tool they have in their environment every single day and keeping those things up to date and viewed and the alerts tuned down so it doesn't become just a noisy mess. And what we discovered was there was really a desire to move to a more mature model. We're taking that OT security data, telemetry data, whether it's populated by CyberX or Fortinet, putting it through to a SIM, your same SIM that's monitoring your IT network, or skipping the SIM entirely and plugging it right back into the SOC where you can populate an extra head. And that extra head we've proven has an ROI, right? If you want to do that on your own, that takes a team of 3 to 4 if you want to follow the sun, or even more when you start adding more tools and more capabilities. Having a third-party partner that's combing through those alerts and triaging things as they come up has proven to be very valuable. The reason, and one of the reasons we're going forward with CyberX is we looked at all the tools on the market, and to provide a true managed service around an OT tool, you've got to have that alert triage capability, threat hunting, settings and configuration abilities to audit. Also bringing up reporting and keeping the whole system healthy. And that's a difficult task in any technology, but I think CyberX had a great platform for it. specifically around their alert features, right? We've got the ability for a SOC analyst who's an IT wonk, right, who knows about route switch and firewall, but maybe doesn't know about Rockwell, doesn't know about Honeywell gear or DCS systems, to take a look at there and get a report that looks and feels like they want to feel, right? And has that mitigation piece on the bottom is the most critical part there. Telling that SOC analyst what he should be concerned about in the OT environment. And I think by doing that, that gives us a good opportunity to put those three kings of a managed service around an OT network, right? And using all these vendors that are here in this slide today to talk about how to spread that peanut butter around and really get OT, IoT supported in a way that might be unique today, and leverage, and as Phil opened this with finding ways to maximize people and projects and accountability and budgets, especially in today's economy. We need to figure out how to use our full-time employees better and how to use our tooling better. I think the managed service is a way to do that. So in closing on my section, I wanted to focus on the plan and the run aspects. I think our other panelists have done a great job on that build components and finding a way to develop that ecosystem of people you're speaking with, whether it's a professional service org, a managed service org, a manufacturing vendor, and finding a way to build your own ecosystem. And that's a picture of Phil taking Buzz Lightyear's place. When I got started in OT security and having worked at operators before, it was really challenging because you felt a little alone, right? Historically, we've relied on the GEs and the Siemens or the Hewitts or the Jacobs to help build that, and we kind of put it away and said, hey, that's your job to secure. I think there's a new economy, a new ecosystem that's there to support anybody as they're going through these same kind of challenges. And with that, I want to say thank you and turn it back over to the CyberX team.
Thanks, Sean. Awesome. And thank you for associating me with Buzz Lightyear. So we're going to wrap up now. If you could just stop sharing for a second, I'll put up the last slide. Sean, thank you. Okay. And we want to thank you for your participation. We have time for a few more questions. I also want to direct you to some upcoming webinars and some more educational information in our knowledge base that will provide additional details on the challenges that we face with IoT and OT security. Hacking ICS Exposed is one of the first books dedicated to this category, and you can download some of the introductory chapters from that book from our website. It's a great place to get started. We've also got the Gartner report I talked about and a solution brief on how you can use these technologies to accelerate your network segmentation projects. If you want to learn more about CyberX's IoT security platform and how it integrates with Microsoft Azure, I encourage you to go look at the Azure Marketplace, and under products, just type in CyberX and you'll see a full description. And then our partners on this call today are running a series of webinars. Fortinet has one coming up very shortly. Optiv has one, and then CyberX is running two of them. One should be really interesting. On May 8th, we have cybersecurity experts from Baker Hughes, which is an oil field services company. First Quality, which is a manufacturer, a multi-billion-dollar manufacturer of specialized paper products. And One Gas, which is a gas energy utility. And we have experts from each of those that are going to talk. It's not going to be, there's no PowerPoint slides. It's going to be a conversation about how do you bring IT and OT together, obviously both from a technical point of view and an organizational point of view. And then on May 22nd, we're going to talk about the MITRE attack framework for ICS, which is an evolution of the MITRE attack framework for enterprise, but with specific tactics, techniques, and procedures that ICS attackers would use. I want to thank my panelists today, and let's just take a quick look at the Q&A. Yeah, we had a question about Azure, Sentinel, and CyberX, and you probably saw my answer to the question. I mean, it's all about defense in depth, multi-layer security. if you can monitor the network layer, if you can monitor Active Directory, if you can monitor your endpoints, if you can bring it all together in a comprehensive analytics platform like Sentinel, that's the way you identify threats faster and mitigate those threats by looking for the root cause. So there's never been a silver bullet in security, and ICS and OT security are no exception.
Hey, Phil, this is Michelle. The folks on the call might not be able to see what the question was, so you might want to qualify what you were answering.
Oh, sorry, I thought I answered to everyone. Okay, thanks. Somebody asked, is it an accurate understanding that Azure Sentinel for IoT requires a solution such as CyberX to be useful? And I just explained that the two are completely complementary. Azure Sentinel aggregates and correlates data from various sources and is an essential element of any SOC strategy, whereas CyberX is focused specifically on monitoring the network layer. Gartner calls this category network security monitoring, or NSM, but in the case of CyberX, it's NSM specifically purpose-built for IoT and OT, based on our understanding of the protocols that are unique to those environments, the devices, and the behaviors that are quite different than what you would find in an IT environment. In an IoT or OT environment, you're talking about machine-to-machine communication. So if you're using anomaly detection or baselining algorithms that were developed for IT environments, they're going to take a lot longer to learn what's going on, and you're going to have a lot more false positives. In the case of CyberX, we have a patent on how we analyze that behavior specifically in machine-to-machine communications. Thank you, Michelle.
If I can add something, Phil.
Please.
So we as well are integrated with Azure Sentinel, and we are also generating our detections. So for us, Sentinel is the same as you mentioned. We are generating the detections and the alerts.
Phil, there's one other question that I wouldn't mind answering if that's okay with you.
Please, go ahead, Michelle.
There's a question here that says, to what level of the Purdue model can agentless sensors, i.e. down to the PLC or RTU level, and how might this ensure zones and conduits that separate environments are not breached? And so I wouldn't mind answering that from a Fortinet perspective, and I'd like to hear the other panelists as well. Is that from an agentless perspective, is that really what you're doing is monitoring the layer 2 traffic at the PLC and RTU level, as well as the controller level, and that when you integrate CyberX and Fortinet together, it gives us the ability of being able to monitor that traffic, understand the risk, and then apply security policies within the firewalls if you decide that you need firewalls. It also answers the zones and conduits questions. That's a part of this, is all a part of the micro segmentation and segmentation that I talked about. So something to take in consideration there. And then relative to controllers, so not at the PLC or RT level, but at the controller level or the SCADA master level, Fortinet can put an EDR agent, and monitor processes on those controllers as well. So a little bit of a detailed answer. Love to be able to send a little bit more information as well. Phil, from a CyberX perspective, what are your thoughts?
So we're monitoring the network traffic. So any communication that appears in the network traffic will be analyzed, and we'll be looking for unauthorized or suspicious activities. And it turns out that even layer 0 traffic eventually ends up on that network traffic. So again, we need a multi-layer defense in depth approach in firewalls, network security monitoring solutions, SIEMs, Azure Security Center for IoT, which also gathers its own intelligence, as Jonathan pointed out, are all important. So as I said before, there's never been a silver bullet, and integration and automation are key to making all these things work together. I want to thank you for your participation. I want to thank my panelists today for their participation. I want to thank members of the audience. We had nearly over 700 registrations for this webinar, so obviously it's a very vital topic to many folks in the world. I want to thank you for your attendance today and have a great rest of your day. The recording will be made available shortly. Watch your email inboxes for a link. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.